Despite all the magic and wonder, The Wizard of Oz has a reputation for being one of the most chaotic film productions ever, and that is certainly warranted. The movie may have been built on a classic children's fable, but the making of it was anything but whimsical. From the non-stop hospitalizations to borderline child abuse, the cast and crew went far beyond the rainbow into a shit show. In the year 1900 came The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, a colorful fairy tale meant to inspire rather than terrify. An instant classic, the novel was a wide-reaching success with adoring fans who hounded the man behind the curtain about making more adventures in the land of Oz. The brain behind it all was author L. Frank Baum. He wrote 13 sequels, mostly for the money, but created a new world that he loved sharing in any way he could, starting with his very popular Broadway musical in 1902. Then in 1908, he attempted a mixed media production that incorporated live actors with a motion picture. Called The Fairy Log and Radio Plays, it was such an expensive failure, Baum sold the rights to his beloved novel to make ends meet, which directly led to the 1910 silent film, which is the earliest surviving adaptation of the book, as Fairy Log has been lost to time. Baum would produce 3 more films set within the world of Oz under his short-lived film studio, and they all failed. Exhausted and broke, Baum died from a stroke in 1919 at the age of 62. Baum's son reacquired the rights to the book and licensed it for many more adaptations of the Oz series, from radio plays to animated shorts, and even a revival of the stage show. Most notoriously was the 1925 film, which was so narratively different from the novel that fans published hate mail in local newspapers. The rights were eventually sold to film studio pioneer Samuel Goldwyn. He attempted to make a musical comedy with Eddie Cantor as the Scarecrow, but the project fell into development hell when 1933's truly horrifying Alice in Wonderland bombed with critics and audiences. Suddenly, the notion of translating a book's fantastical world into live action scared producers. Then in 1937, Walt Disney released the first feature-length animated film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Widely considered to be a masterpiece, it became the highest-grossing film ever, and suddenly Hollywood was ready to jump into fantasy. Due to the popularity of this series, Oz was at the top of everyone's list, including Walt Disney. Now the belle of the ball, Samuel Goldwyn held an auction for the rights to The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Meanwhile, across town, producer/director Mervyn LeRoy had just landed at MGM Studios. He met with studio head Louis B. Mayer and was asked about what films he was interested in making. It had been a dream of LeRoy's since he was a kid to make Oz into a film. On behalf of LeRoy, Mayer entered the auction and was the highest bidder at $75,000. LeRoy was off to make The Wizard. LeRoy wanted to direct the movie himself, but he was already in the midst of producing 2 other films.
Mr. Mayer called me in and said, look, why don't you just produce this picture? You're so crazy about it. And I said, but LB, I want to direct this picture too. He said, well, I think it's too big for you to do both. But I produced it and I'm very proud of it.
Not that it mattered, as under the old studio system, the vision of a film was more in the power of the producers versus any director. From the 1920s to the 1950s, the golden age of Hollywood was run by this studio system, where movie houses controlled every aspect of their films, all the way down to the theater chains they owned. Nearly everyone under these studios were company men, paid weekly for years-long contracts, told when and where to make their films. Perhaps a steady job, but cast and crew were effectively owned by the studio, and they had little say in the productions they took part in or their careers at large. Of the 8 major studios, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, aka MGM, was the biggest by far, finishing a film, on average, every 9 days. They had the money and the talent to make The Wizard of Oz at the grandest scale possible. LeRoy first hired director Norman Taurog. He did some test footage, but he spent so little time on Oz, he legitimately doesn't remember working on it. MGM sent him downriver to make The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn with Mickey Rooney, a film he had already tackled 7 years earlier. Next on the list was Richard Thorpe. He was chosen for his efficiency and ability to keep things under budget, though that may have been why he would not be the last director on the picture. The greatest challenge of the film was the writing. LeRoy picked a lot of brains in adapting Baum's classic, even his assistant. They argued why the story should be stripped of all magical elements, like the film of 1925. LeRoy disagreed. He was committed to a faithful adaptation that embraced the fantasy.
These things must be done delicately.
After a few false starts, LeRoy employed 3 separate writers who were unaware of the others' hiring. The first was Herman Mankiewicz, one of the most valued screenwriters of his time. His 2 biggest contributions were transitioning from black and white to color when Dorothy arrives in Oz.
You're in black and white.
I'm supposed to be in black and white. The color comes in a minute.
Oh. Don't adjust your sets, folks.
And even though the cyclone hits by page 4 in the novel, that the film spends a good portion of its time establishing Dorothy's life in Kansas before her journey. 2 weeks in, Mankiewicz moved on, handing in only 56 pages. The second writer, witty poet Ogden Nash, provided nothing. The third was Noel Langley, LeRoy's favorite. He worked on the script for 4 months. While his version was much bigger with more characters, a vast majority of what Langley wrote would be the foundation for the entire film. He came up with the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion being doppelgangers of the Kansas farmhands, and making the whole outlandish adventure a dream sequence. Therefore, hopefully, making it more palatable to audiences. He also famously changed the silver shoes from the book into ruby slippers to flaunt their usage of Technicolor film. In June of 1938, Langley turned in his script with a big stamp that said, "Do not make changes." LeRoy immediately turned around and had Florence Ryerson and Edgar Allan Wolfe spend 2 months streamlining Langley's script. They also added things like Professor Marvel and the emotional hook of Dorothy wanting to return home. Langley was so furious to find out that this happened, he demanded LeRoy take his name off the film. LeRoy instead rehired Langley to make last-minute changes. Multiple other screenwriters came and went throughout the film's odyssey, over a dozen in total, but it was on-set writer John Lee Mahan who contributed the final touches to a script he called 92% There. He gave the actors quippier moments and polished all scenes in Kansas. When it came to a screen credit, he politely declined adding his name, so only Langley, Ryerson, and Wolfe were given on-screen credit. The one person rarely mentioned, though, is lyricist E.Y. Harburg. Obviously not overlooked for his songs, which were created from scratch, choosing to ditch the popular Broadway melodies. He and composer Harold Arlen were crafting the musical numbers, so a lot of the script had to fall in line with what they had orchestrated. Harburg took it upon himself to meld all the scripts together in order to weave in and out of his lyrics. Furthermore, he wrote the scene of the wizard gifting the travelers with what they desired most, with one glaring error.
PhD? That's Doctor of Thinkology.
Sum of the square roots of any 2 sides of an isosceles triangle is equal to the square root of the remaining side.
That's a right triangle, you idiot!
Go!
Around the same time LeRoy started, lyricist Arthur Freed had recently been promoted to a producer at MGM. Too junior to handle production of this size, he was made an associate producer on Oz. LeRoy tasked him with all things musical. Freed hired Harburg and Arlen for the music and made a lineup of potential stars. Most of the cast was chosen just as Freed listed. However, the Scarecrow was originally given to Buddy Ebsen, and Ray Bolger was set as the Tin Man. Bolger felt he was born to play the Scarecrow and badgered the producers until they swapped roles. Ebsen was simply happy to be involved. When it came to the Cowardly Lion, they didn't know how to pull it off. First, they cut him from the movie, then toyed with the idea of using Leo the Lion, MGM's literal trademark mascot, then eventually settled on a man in a costume, to be played by Burt Lahr. But they didn't want to repeat the mistakes of Alice in Wonderland. In fact, that movie frequently served as a lesson in what not to do, from makeup to scene structure. In comparison, their guiding star was always Snow White. They initially had Gale Sondergaard as a more glamorous Wicked Witch of the East, just like the Evil Queen. Fearing fan backlash, LeRoy decided to make her ugly instead, and that wasn't what Sondergaard signed on for.
I've never heard of a beautiful witch before. Only bad witches are ugly.
Margaret Hamilton filled her shoes. MGM knew this was going to be an expensive venture and wanted a headlining star for Dorothy Gale. They considered loaning Shirley Temple from Fox, as the 10-year-old would match the character in the book. But after her unimpressive vocal audition, the producers went back to their one and only choice, Judy Garland. Arthur Freed was assigned to find projects for the upcoming actor and felt Garland's spectacular singing voice was perfect for Dorothy. And LeRoy wholeheartedly agreed.
I thought that she was the most adorable creature that was ever put on this earth, and so right for the part of Dorothy. She was just like a little girl from Kansas, with great big eyes. She wasn't pretty, just plump, but in a way she was beautiful.
See that tragically beautiful girl, the one in the chair.
It's often reported how poorly Garland was treated on the set of Oz. However, it's more accurate to say how poorly she was treated during her entire 15 years at MGM. Frances Ethel Gum was born June 10, 1922. An entertainer at heart, she was already performing on stage with her vaudevillian family at the age of 2. Adopting the stage name Judy Garland, her career was spearheaded by her merciless mother, who began giving her 9-year-old daughter amphetamines to perform and barbiturates to sleep, starting a lifelong addiction. Garland would later call her mother the real Wicked Witch of the East. When she was 13, she signed on with MGM, based solely on her vocal talent, because to MGM, it certainly wasn't for her looks. In the studio's eyes, Garland was their ugly duckling. During her first film, she was referred to as the fat little pig with pigtails. Louis B. Mayer called her the little hunchback, and was especially concerned about her weight, giving direct orders that her diet consist of only chicken soup, black coffee, and cigarettes. They also prescribed her an additional addictive drug to suppress her appetite, which in turn caused paranoia and insomnia. By the time she was filming Wizard of Oz at the age of 16, Garland was on a whirlwind of uppers and downers. Everyone remembers her being lovable and cheerful on set, but in her mind, she was swinging from the rafters. She was known for wild fits of uncontrollable laughter. When Dorothy meets the Cowardly Lion, she wouldn't stop laughing at Bert Lahr's antics. So director Victor Fleming took her behind the stage and slapped her across the face. While they did complete the scene in the very next take, a regretful Fleming wished someone punched him in the nose for what he just did.
You ought to be ashamed of yourself.
They had her wear caps to hide her teeth, a restrictive corset to hide her figure, and put rubber discs in her nose to reshape it. Wardrobe and makeup would openly debate how to fix her flaws as if she wasn't in the room, leading to her never-ending body image issues. Garland wondered if she was so right for Dorothy, then why did they keep changing her? As she said, "I was studied like a piece of merchandise. It didn't occur to anyone that I might have feelings." And she wasn't allowed breaks, as any free moment when cameras weren't rolling, she was in legally mandated tutoring sessions. Garland felt like MGM had stolen her youth, but it was the only life she knew. With the release of Oz, Garland became America's sweetheart, and her popularity soared, allowing MGM to exert even more control over her, which only added more troubles, with depression and alcoholism joining the list. When she was 28, her substance abuse became a liability. After no-shows on 3 separate films, MGM terminated her contract. Garland very publicly went through nervous breakdowns, abusive relationships, 5 marriages, 1 arranged by MGM, and bounced from suicide attempts to comeback performances, all the while raising 3 children and shielding them from the drama. After every stumble, her ceaseless need for admiration brought her back to the stage and screen, proving time and again why she was one of the greatest performers of all time. Garland resented that she was looked upon as a tragic figure, but it was in part because of all of her heartbreak that she gained a passionate, ongoing fan base, especially in the LGBTQ community. They saw themselves in Garland, someone who wasn't allowed to be herself, but fought through that pain, showing her resilience through vulnerability.
You don't know what it's like to watch somebody you love just crumble away bit by bit, day by day, in front of your eyes, and stand there helpless.
On June 22nd, 1969, Judy Garland died from an accidental overdose on the same sleeping pills that her mother had first given her. She was 47. The Wizard of Oz was not the sole cause of her struggles. It was simply the next complex step in her life. Lucky, joyous, pivotal, painful. Since Wizard of Oz's release, a great many myths have emerged that have been debunked. Buddy Epson didn't die from the silver makeup. The Munchkin cast weren't drunken degenerates running amok. A rumor mostly perpetuated by Judy Garland. One or two of the 120 may have been hungover once or twice, giving them all a bad rap. And no, one of them didn't hang themselves in the background. That said, the Oz set was infamously miserable, slow, and accident-prone. Filming began in October of 1938, and just over a week in, a light exploded, raining sparks down on Garland and a straw-stuffed Ray Bolger.
How about a little fire, Scarecrow?
Then Buddy Epson found himself in the ER, unable to breathe. He suffered an allergic reaction inhaling the painted-on dust that was now clogging his lungs. He spent the next 2 weeks inside of an oxygen tent. The press was told he had pneumonia. LeRoy was forced to recast him with Jack Haley, and the makeup was changed to an aluminum paste. The halt in filming allowed LeRoy to reevaluate what director Richard Thorpe had done so far, and he wasn't happy. He felt Thorpe's vision was broad, lifeless, and not magical, so LeRoy fired him. The press was told he'd fallen seriously ill. Ironically, Thorpe was reassigned to Huckleberry Finn, taking over from Norman Taurog. MGM still wouldn't let LeRoy direct, so until he could find a full-time director, he asked George Cukor to help solve the problems he felt were plaguing the film. Cukor didn't care for the book, but he knew why Thorpe's version wasn't working. He spent less than a week on Oz and didn't shoot a single frame, but he made subtle yet significant lasting changes. He toned down the backdrops, gave the ruby slippers little bows, intensified the Wicked Witch's features, then softened the look of the heroes, especially Dorothy, who was dolled up like a princess wearing a blonde wig. And with all the big acting choices happening around her, Cukor reined in Garland's equally exaggerated performance to be more grounded. This meant everything Thorpe had filmed, the Scarecrow's introduction, and a majority of the scenes at the witch's castle needed to be reshot. Cukor then left to direct Gone with the Wind. MGM brought in their veteran fixer, director Victor Fleming. Fleming liked touting that obstacles made for better pictures, but this was going to be a gauntlet.
I may not come out alive, but I'm going in there. There's only one thing I want you fellas to do. What's that? Talk me out of it.
They spent his first 3 days shooting early Tin Man scenes only to realize that he was in his shiny, unrusted costume. This mistake stressed LeRoy out so much he stayed in bed for 3 days. 2 flying monkeys were hospitalized after falling when their wires snapped. Jack Haley tripped and his costume nearly crushed his windpipe. The alcoholic choreographer drunkenly fell into a trap door on top of a stuntwoman while explaining how to avoid it. Lots of falling.
Look what happened by accident.
And any scene with Toto had to wait a few weeks until Terry the Terrier recovered after an extra stepped on her back.
People keep asking if I'm back, and I haven't really had an answer. But now, yeah, I'm thinking I'm back.
Because of the color processing required for Technicolor film, the set had to be extremely well lit, costing roughly 1/10 of the budget. And those lights made the room reach over 100 degrees. They had firemen on hand warning if a stage was in risk of being set ablaze. When it got too hot, they opened the stage doors to air out the room, slowing down the whole production. An excessive exposure to the lights gave some an inflammatory eye condition called Klieg eyes.
Look at the circles under my eyes. I haven't slept in weeks.
By all accounts, none of the main stars enjoyed their time on the film. Their makeup was uncomfortable, the costumes were sweltering under those lights, they were given rewrites the day of, and due to their off-putting appearances, MGM paid them to eat lunch alone in their trailers. Haley called it a horrendous job.
People question me like you're questioning me now and say it must have been fun making that picture. It was not fun like hell. It was fun. It was a lot of hard work. It was not fun at all. There's nothing funny about it.
But none of that compared to what the Wicked Witch of the East endured. Fleming wanted to film her disappearance in Munchkinland in one shot. They did it perfectly on their first try, which is used in the movie. On the 6th take, the fire went off too early and Margaret Hamilton's broom and hat went up in flames, as did she. Quickly put out, she suffered first-degree burns to her face and second-degree burns to her right hand. To make matters worse, her green makeup consisted of a toxic copper that needed to be removed immediately. To the end of her life, Hamilton said she never experienced worse pain than the alcohol being scrubbed into her freshly burned skin.
I had a wonderful young man, Jack Young, who really saved my life. After he got the makeup off, which was very traumatic for me because it was fraught. It was just, it hurt so much. I was just, you sort of trembled. You just can't help it. I was just shaking with it.
Yet she never screamed. Per Hamilton, that wouldn't be polite. Sent home for 6 weeks with pay, MGM feared a lawsuit if they replaced her, so production moved around her schedule. The day she returned, they wanted to shoot the scenes of the witch skywriting. She was asked if she wanted to wear her new fireproof costume. Sensing something was up, Hamilton refused to participate. Her stunt double, Betty Danko, stepped in. Fleming wanted her cape to billow in the wind, but the cape hid the smoke-emitting pipe, so they moved the pipe under her legs. 3 takes later, the pipe exploded. Danko's injury required a f***ing hysterectomy.
They sure knocked the stuffings out of you, didn't they?
At one point, MGM told LeRoy to shut down production on this costly kids' movie. Perhaps confusing courage with wisdom, LeRoy convinced them to keep going. But MGM closed the set to any visitors to prevent any more bad press from leaking. 1 month from finishing, the Gone with the Wind production came blowing in. Clark Gable, dissatisfied with director George Cukor, got him fired and demanded that Victor Fleming take over. Fleming, the fixer, moved over to Gone with the Wind.
My, people come and go so quickly here.
However, because he actually enjoyed Oz, he would return late at night to help with the editing. To keep things moving, while they searched for yet another director, LeRoy sneakily filmed a few scenes. Then King Vidor became the 4th director on Oz, filming pickups and all Kansas sequences. A secret held until Fleming's death.
I went over and Victor Fleming was a good friend and I took over. It was about, as I remember, it was about 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks possibly, which included the Somewhere Over the Rainbow. But I did not want any credit, and as long as Victor was alive, I kept quiet about it.
Principal photography ended in March of 1939, with several reshoots taking place up until June. An average MGM film took 22 days of filming. Oz had planned for 53 days. It took 86. Post-production took forever too, due to challenges like perfecting a tornado in a pre-digital age. But the sound alone took months. From re-recording dozens of dialogue thanks to the wind machines, to synchronizing the Tin Man's clanks to the music. With the film running long, the studio wanted it cut to under 2 hours. They chopped everything considered superfluous. An extended version of Scarecrow's Song and Dance, reprise of Ding Dong the Witch is Dead and Over the Rainbow, and an entire number called The Jitterbug, feeling like it tied itself too closely to the dance craze. Most famously, after the second test screening, MGM cut Over the Rainbow as it prolonged the Kansas portion. They put it back in after LeRoy furiously protested, knowing it was the heart of his film. Victor Fleming thought the movie was the most troublesome picture he had ever made, but that in the end, it attains something even beyond the expectations of those who made it. The Wizard of Oz skipped to theaters nationwide throughout August 1939. Reviews were nearly unanimous in calling it joyful, warm, funny, and like the novel, wonderful. While the film opened big at the box office, it didn't have legs, grossing barely $3 million. Costing just under $2.8 million with a marketing budget of $250,000, the film didn't break even.
You've been more trouble to me than you're worth, one way and another.
Removing some of that sting, it was nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards, won for Best Original Score and Best Original Song for that nearly cut number, Over the Rainbow, and for her year's worth of work, Judy Garland was given the Honorary Juvenile Award. However, that year's ceremony was all about Gone with the Wind, where Victor Fleming won Best Director. The award was handed to him by Mervyn LeRoy. Despite 2 re-releases that finally made the movie turn a slight profit, The Wizard of Oz was spinning toward obscurity. Then on November 3rd, 1956, CBS paid MGM to air the film on broadcast television. 45 million people tuned in, far more than those who had seen it in theaters. It aired again in 1959 and did even better. For the next 3 decades, MGM made it an annual must-see event for millions of households, and making MGM millions more. This is why The Wizard of Oz is considered the most watched film in history.
I'm very surprised by it. I'm very happy about it. We never believed it was going to be as big as it is. And I think it'll go on for many, many years, long after I'm gone, and a lot of other people too.
The untold number of families showing it to the next generation cemented the film's status as a classic, and made it arguably more influential than L. Frank Baum's novel. A film so ingrained into the fabric of not just pop culture, but society at large.
There was Dorothy and Toto and the Wicked Witch of the Watts.
You're not in Kansas anymore.
Oh, Lisa's a Dorothy. That's great. Well, we're not in Kansas anymore.
What does that mean? It means buckle your seatbelt, Dorothy. Because Kansas is going bye-bye.
Down the road. My déjà vu. I'll always remember you. And I'll miss you most of all, Scarecrow.
Oh, okay. It's kind of an odd thing to say.
Yeah, sort of a weird comment right in front of all of us.
Kind of thought this was a team effort.
Yeah.
What is a demilitarized zone? Sounds like something out of The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, no. Follow the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Follow the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
The Wizard of Oz. Zardos.
Oh, and these guys have their own issues. Boys?
There's probably lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. Come on, you guys. Lions and tigers and bears. Oh my.
Lions, tigers, bears.
Oh my.
Oh, you look so
stupid.
And you, lad, all you need is a brain. Why does everyone keep saying that?
She's based on me, you know.
I had the strangest dream. And you were in it, and you.
I'm in for a twister. I don't see a rainbow, do you?
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little soul, too.
And your little dog, too.
Look, the Wizard of Oz did the multiverse first, and they did it best. The gays knew it, but we didn't listen.
The good witch. There's no place like home. There's no place like home.
You're melting. No! I'm melting! Melting!
I'm melting!
What a world! What a world! Fly, my pretties, fly, fly!
And I'd like to know how Loki used it to turn 2 of the sharpest men I know into his personal flying monkeys.
Monkeys? I do not understand.
I do.
I understood that reference.
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high,
there's a land that I've heard of.
Once in a
Sometimes a film should be weighed against the misery it caused while making it, to determine if it was worth it. In rare cases, a film can possibly be forgiven for touching so many hearts and minds that it becomes a universally beloved work of art. There's a reason why Over the Rainbow was not only Judy Garland's signature song throughout her entire career, but is also an enduring piece of Americana. We all dare to dream of a better future where the clouds are far behind us. As Baum, the Wizard of Oz himself, said about his own fairy tale, it should retain wonderment and joy, and leave out the heartaches and nightmares.
I was brought up on the books of the Wizard of Oz, and my mother told me that these were great philosophies. It was a very simple philosophy that everybody had a heart, that everybody had a brain, that everybody had courage. These were the gifts that given you come on this earth. And if you use them properly, you reach the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And that pot of gold was a home. And home isn't just a house or an abode, it's people who love you
and that you love. That's a home.
If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't
Get your hands off of me.
Shh, don't be scared. Somewhere over the rainbow, there's another rainbow.